Thanks.
Congressman Turner.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member, I appreciate your continued focus on the issue of the financial crisis that we've had and how that we look further into holding people accountable. My community has been significantly impacted by the mortgage foreclosure crisis, which was a precursor of the financial meltdown that we saw in our financial industry. My primary county in my district of Montgomery County, with a population of approximately around 500,000, since I have been in Congress for 6.5 years, has had 27,000 foreclosures. 27,000 foreclosures in an area of about 500,000 people. Most recently, last week, this Congress moved forward with calling for a commission that would look at the mortgage foreclosure crisis and its contributions to the financial crisis. When the financial crisis was first identified, there was a discussion of the issue of toxic assets, which people described as mortgage-backed securities. And we know that AIG had issues with mortgage-backed securities and also credit default swaps that were related to mortgage-backed securities. From the experience in my community where we had the mortgage foreclosure crisis, what we saw, what those individuals at our Fair Housing Lending Center saw, and others who tried to impact this and to assist families that were going through it, is that the loan-to-value ratio of loans that the families received, predominantly through refinancing, started with the family being underwater, meaning that the value of the loan that the family was given exceeded the value of the property. I'm from Ohio. We're not an area that has had wild speculation in property values or an escalation, modest appreciation. So a loan-to-value ratio where you're underwater, where you start the loan underwater, structurally is a loan that if there's any difficulty at all, is going to go to foreclosure. The asset, of course, is not valued high enough to back the loan as collateral, and the family is left with leaving the home, sometimes to abandonment and to the financial institutions. This commission that's moving forward is going to take a look at this issue. It's going to take a look at the issue is how do we get into this problem of the mortgages that were granted. And I believe that what we're going to see is probably the largest theft or fraud in history, where there was a systematic effort to give people loans that either exceeded the value of their property or were in such a high loan-to-value ratio that the loan itself was likely to result in foreclosure. So, sir, what I want to ask you is I'm looking for documents where our financial institutions had knowledge or knew that this process was happening. I believe that if there are mortgage-backed securities that were issued where the issuers knew that the collateral was insufficient to support the value of the loan, that's fraud. I believe that if the loan-to-value ratios are not disclosed to the subsequent purchasers, that it affects the very level of the risk for the mortgage-backed security, and therefore I think that also is fraud. And it certainly affects the value of the underlying mortgage and the suspicion that it would have a higher likelihood for default. Now, I understand you have a very big organization, but I am assuming that somewhere along the way, someone in your organization, an analyst, someone who is reviewing the processes of the trading of mortgage-backed securities, the issuing of them, the issuing of mortgages, someone who was looking at this may have brought to the attention of the company or others that there was a problem with the loan-to-value ratios that were being packaged and then traded. Because I can tell you in my community, on the ground, the problem existed. So my question to you is, has anyone ever discussed this issue with you, that there was a problem with the loan-to-value ratio of the underlying mortgages inherent in the mortgage-backed securities that were subject to credit default swaps? And also, would you be willing to share with this committee, for the purposes of sharing with the commission that's going to be impaneled, any documents or information that you have where there is a discussion of how that loan-to-value ratio affects the level of risk for the mortgage-backed securities with it being out of whack? In other words, any documents that you have where someone says, I have a concern that this loan-to-value ratio is such that the loan exceeds the value of the asset, that the collateral is insufficient to support the value of the loan, the mortgage, and that lack of collateral value and that excessive loan-to-value ratio affects the level of risk for these mortgage-backed securities and therefore their ultimate value?
Yes, I'd add one thing to what you just said. In AIG's, particularly AIG-FP's situation, we insured those values. So it wasn't just one individual home. They all went into a pool, and different institutions would aggregate those pools. So what would come out of it, you'd have 100,000 loans. So you didn't get to look at the loan-to-value ratio at each one of those. You'd look at the rating. Many of those were rated AAA by the rating agencies, and when the AIG-FP people underwrote them, they took at face value that they were AAA rated. So we have some of the same angst over the situation as you do. We'll help you in whatever way you'd like and whatever way we can. I just caution you that we're kind of down at the bottom of that food chain as well, and by the time we looked at these things, they had been aggregated to a point where we didn't look at loan-to-value ratios on an individual house. We looked at them at a whole pool of items. So we may not be a source of information that you're seeking. If we are, we'll help you with it. But we could be a source of, at a minimum, equally frustrated, because we assumed, we took at face value that these were AAA rated. They were not.
Well, and that's why I'm asking for your help, because if we have this commission impaneled and they're given the responsibility to look at it, this is going to be like pulling threads to get to what was, I believe, ultimately a systematic process for this to occur, and you might have information that help leads us in the right direction.
If we do, we'll be delighted to share it with you.
Gentleman's
Thank you so
time
much.
has expired.